Welcome to this very interesting morning that we have created specially for you on the eve of Republic Day. We thought that it would be very, very interesting for all of us to come together to initiate a discussion with three very bright young minds from our old school, the Indus Valley World School. And before I take our discussion forward, I'm going to request all three of them to introduce themselves.
Good afternoon. My name is Brinda Banerjee. I'm a student of 11 Humanities.
Good morning. My name is Devajyoti Mishra. I'm a student of 11 Science B.
Good afternoon, Niharika Chakravarti from 11 Humanities.
Wonderful. So, we've come together this afternoon to actually talk about the importance of the Indian Constitution and the very, very important document that actually precedes our Constitution, which is the Preamble. We all know that India gained independence in 1947, and it took our Constitution makers 2.5 years of very, very serious deliberation and thinking and discussion to create this body of laws that has stood the test of time 70 years now. We thought it would be nice for us to actually open this up for discussion with these young minds who are very much a post independent generation, and it leaves us wondering sometimes, what are these young people actually thinking about this very, very important document? And when we come forward to talk about this important document, what immediately comes to mind, and particularly to me because I am a history person, is that this preamble begins with three very important words. And what are they? It says, "We, the people of India." And this is where I want to bring in my friend Brinda Banerjee to tell us what are her thoughts about we, the people. It's over to you, Brinda.
Um, I think it is often romanticized and deliberately emphasized upon. The notion that the very founding principles of this nation begin with we the people. To me, it's one of the most fascinating and important parts of the Constitution. We're at an age where you and I, we aren't blind to what goes on around us. And it makes you think where these people in the divisions of too much democracy, too little democracy, had been once pictured as a singular group of people, when those who seek to elevate voices and those who seek to suppress them had been seen as one. As I grow older, I begin to understand why every social studies teacher would emphasize on those words every time we learn about the preamble. They were carefully chosen, giving power to the voices of the Indian people, including those who hadn't been given the same before. One would think that in times like these, when and where have the voices of the people mattered? When small crowds turn to revolts to fight for their causes, when cries for justice remain unheard. It's common for us to be pessimistic or even scoff at the notion that it is we who have a say. But there were those before us too, to whom a democratic India seemed like a distant dream. And it is their toil, time and time again, that has led us to where we are. We are still fighting for the dignities of those around us, vocalizing the need for rights for all, acknowledging and embracing the brotherhood among every one of us. One must understand that it isn't the British who left us this constitution. This is not the efforts of one man claiming to be the voices of the masses. It is we who gifted ourselves this constitution. We who declared our nation's pride being in these ideals of sovereignty, secularism, socialism, etc. It is we, the people, who freed our land. We, the people, who demanded that we educate our women. We, the people, who put aside our differences. And we, the people, who became one. Now, there is always this glorified end, but I think there is a greater glory in this struggle for a better tomorrow. We, the children of today, are the voices of tomorrow. Our fight begins with recognizing the bigotry and prejudices amongst those surrounding us, learning of the struggles undergone by nations and people before us, and also recognizing our privilege to access information and even use social media to recognize institutionalized or even culturally ingrained intolerance. Our voices and our causes, our awareness and our resilience is what strengthens the nation.
It's so wonderful to hear a young person is on the verge of stepping into adulthood having such wonderful thoughts about what are her views about the term we the people. I'm sure other people would have other notions about it. And it would be interesting for us to hear what my other two friends would have to share when we think of we the people. Niharika, would you like to respond?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with Brenda, whatever she said. There was one thing that you mentioned about social studies teachers emphasizing on that point. I, for one, have had a different experience because everywhere that I've seen people focusing on the keywords, bringing up sovereign, secular, socialist, but it's very often forgotten that there's a reason why those words are in caps too, right at the beginning of the document, we the people of India. And this is the reason why most of the preambles of so many nations, the oldest constitution, that is of the United States, also begins with "We the people of the United States." And the people who went on to form this, the Constituent Assembly, the father of the Indian Constitution, B.R. Ambedkar, someone who was himself treated, as an untouchable, for him to go on and not write "We the people of a certain religion, of a certain gender, of a certain caste," but to go on to write "We the people of India," such an all inclusive statement, even for the United States for that matter. So many inequalities must have existed. But it just goes on to show the importance of the words and the document itself, that when you go on to frame something like this, you keep in mind that everyone is equal and that there is an even playing ground. That's it, I guess.
That's so fascinating because very true, Brinda. I always think about this that what is it that was going on in the minds of these constitution makers when they were framing this constitution for us? Because, India being a nation which sees people from so many different strands and stratas of society, it was so vital for them to decide on what kind of a government we would have and what kind of rules and regulations would govern this nation. And that's actually what brings me to a point which you've already raised, Niharika, and I'm going to request my friend Debojyoti to elaborate on that. Because, when we look at the preamble, there are 5 terms in that preamble which are very striking for us because the constitution makers included those 5 terms. Two actually came in later. But those 5 terms actually define what is going to be the basis of the Indian polity. And I'm sure all three of you know what I'm talking about because I'm talking about India being made a sovereign, socialist, secular, democratic republic. I want to point out to those who are going to listen in to our discussion that it's very important for us to note that the terms socialist and secular were added to the preamble a good 25 years after the constitution had been enforced. So there was definitely a lot of thinking that went into adding the terms socialist and secular. And here is where I'm going to invite Debojyoti to come in and share his views about the term secularism. Debojyoti, it's over to you.
Thank you, ma'am. I'm going to speak today on whether India is a secular nation. I have deliberately framed the question so as to not restrict it to India as a secular state. For I believe it's not enough if the Indian state is secular. It is equally, if not more important, that we are a secular society and a secular nation. I believe this question needs to be asked, reflected upon, and answered truthfully. At the outset, it must be stated that I'm a firm believer in the concept of secularism. It is my belief that India's survival as a multi religious, multilingual, multiracial, multicultural society will depend on how successful it is in working its secularism. To me, secularism is the freedom to profess, practice, and propagate any religion, or no religion for that matter, as it is written in the Constitution. It's a complete separation of government from religion. and it is the equality of all religions in the eyes of the law. But most importantly, it is mutual respect, its acceptance and inclusion of every person in society, despite their religious beliefs or lack thereof. A country may be called secular if only its government is separated from religion, but it is so much more than that. To me, true secularism is when people can respect others' points of view despite religious differences. To me, true secularism is when people can cherish their similarities and appreciate each other's differences. And to me, a truly secular country is one in which no one is discriminated against for their personal beliefs. However, secularism has downgraded in our country as of now. Many religious extremists are now looking to demolish the secularism that now prevails in our country. Few call the secularism fake, and few even call it unjust. And this banishment of secularism is not only from one side, but from many sides of the religious spectrum. Now, obviously, no good will come of communal violence and religiously motivated killings. And whenever governments have been polluted by religion, it has never ended well, as in the case of Sri Lanka and Yugoslavia. But I do believe that we can build a better India by keeping up our efforts and being more accommodating to people from all walks of life. India has done its best to keep religion out of government. It's done it from the very start. After all, secularism is one of the main pillars of our country's constitution that keeps the democratic value of our country upheld. And in my mind, if we learn to, again, I want to emphasize this point, if we learn to accept, include, and respect each other instead of discriminating on the basis of religion, we can build a more fair and a greater nation that's built on inclusion and not exclusion.
Wonderful thoughts there, Devajyoti. Very, very hard hitting thoughts, particularly at the crossroads where we stand today as a nation. I would ask the other two of you, does anyone have anything to ask Devajyoti or respond to what he has said?
I was wondering, what do you think secularism means to us, the current generation? What does it mean to you?
Oh, well, thank you for the question. In my opinion, to me, secularism is, as I said, isn't just the separation of religion from state, but the inclusion and acceptance of all religions in our society. For example, when I first joined a school in Pune, I had made a horrible mistake. See, that school was vegetarian and very strict about it. But my parents and I didn't know about that rule. And so on my first day, I came in confidently, with a smile on my face, happy that I had a tasty chicken sandwich for lunch. But obviously, it didn't work out as I had hoped. Within 5 seconds, every person near me ran away, and within the next 10 seconds, they brought in students from other classes to point at me. The day ended with me having to throw away my lunch, having my school diary torn apart, and my desk defaced with communal slurs. So, what is my view on secularism? I think, well, India still has a far way to go in terms of acceptance, but if we, the youth of India, remain committed to this value, we can achieve true acceptance of all religions equally.
Very well said, Devajyoti. And Niharika, would you have something to share on Devajyoti's thoughts right now?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with him. I think India is a constitutionally secular country, but socially it still isn't. We still have a long way to go, like you said, a lot to work upon.
I agree, and this is where I feel so positive because the hope lies in the hands of young people like you, and I'm sure young people like you across our cities and states are thinking on similar lines, and they will definitely make a difference. Moving on from the main uh, terms that defined the nation for our constitution makers, I wish to now delve a little on the ideals that were enshrined in this preamble. And those are vital because they are really the pillars that prop up the nation per se. And all of us know I'm referring to justice, liberty, equality, and fraternity, as was put down in the preamble for us. And this is where I'm going to invite my friend Niharika Chakraborty to tell us her views about this aspect. Niharika, it's over to you.
Yeah, I'd like to start off by mentioning an engraving in the Central Secretariat building of Delhi. And it says that liberty doesn't descend to a person, people must raise themselves to liberty. And liberty is a blessing that must be earned in order to be enjoyed. This is one word which I think means a thousand different things to a thousand different people. What's liberty to me probably isn't liberty to the two of you, or to the three of you for that matter. And when the Constitution was formed, very small acts that we today take for granted, maybe something even as simple as education, was liberty for the people. But we've come a long way since then, and my idea of liberty stands totally opposed to what it did for my grandmother. For me, it's a multitude of things. It means having the choice to do whatever I want with my life, being able to pursue my ambitions unhesitatingly, being able to change our education system for that matter. Above all, I think it's the freedom to make mistakes and learn from them myself in what has become this 21st century success story. It means having my minimum rights, being able to earn our daily bread, regardless of any caste or class, color distinctions. So basically, liberty to me is freedom, it is equality, and it is being able to voice my opinions on things I truly believe in. Because without equality, what would liberty become? It would just become dominance. A very simple example of which is the racial discrimination which has existed since forever outside. I have been privileged in the sense that I've gotten to do almost everything that I've ever wanted. And I'm thankful for that. And I do acknowledge the struggles of all those before me to have gotten to this point. But I also do understand that for someone who lives in the slums of India, freedom would translate into the necessity to climb out of a life full of deprivation and poverty into a more stable, better place. There is a famous quote which goes that I am not free while any woman is unfree, even when her shackles are very different from my own. So basically, that being said, you cannot be free while others around us, others around you are free too. So, there are still many people out there who are still struggling. They don't have that space to be heard out where, they can express themselves. And I think that is the exact idea of being free and lies at the core of democracy, which is why it shouldn't be forgotten. So, as times keep changing and we keep on becoming more liberal by the passing day, an example of which is the removal of Section 377, I think it's also important for us to remember that there are still many out there for whom that struggle is still going on, as one would say, Dilli bahut dur hai. So, we should, as future generations, celebrate all the freedoms that we've been given, aspire for newer ones, and keep agitating for all those denied.
You really left me thinking, Niharika, because I really do agree with you when you say that liberty might mean a host of things to you, which might be very different to what it means to me. And this is where I would like you to maybe comment or tell us a little about how you perceive this, because while you were speaking to us, I do recollect you saying that it's something very different to my grandmother than what it is to me. So, how do you think this face of liberty in the nation has changed from then, let's say 50 years ago, to what it stands as now?
I think, as the preamble has already stated, liberty of thought, expression, belief, faith, and worship, all of these things to touch upon actually. The right to maybe impart and receive education at that point, information at that point, freedom of press, which has come along. They couldn't circulate the information they wanted. Today, you can as long as it's within the law and something even secularism which has been added later on, but at that point there was still differences which existed in the society, but under the colonial rule somewhere you had to hide your Indianness. But when the constitution was formed and they stated equality for everyone, they could, it provided an even playing ground for everyone so that they could assert their identity in the society, they could reclaim their space, their language. So I think these are the simple things: right to vote, right to education for a female, for that matter, being equal to her male counterpart. I think these are the simple things which would have meant liberty at that point of time.
That's so true. And yes, I mean, the perspectives and the faces might be changing. But what is very, very important for us to remember is that, these are the main pillars that have remained entrenched in what is the basis of the Indian polity. I think we've had a very, very thought provoking discussion between the three of you, and it's definitely given us a lot of food for thought. But before we close for this afternoon, I would really like, you know, all three of you to say anything else that comes to your mind or some closing remarks that you would want to make on the occasion, on let's say the eve of Republic Day. So, Brinda, may I request you to come forward first? Let's ask Debujyoti first.
Yes, ma'am. In my concluding remarks, I'd like to say it's still my firm belief that people should respect each other's views, despite of religious beliefs or lack thereof, and treasure their similarities and appreciate their differences for what they are. I also think that we here have gathered with our different perspectives together and found some similarities in our views.
That's so true because we are all different individuals and we all have very, very different opinions about issues. But what is so wonderful is that, which has come through in our discussion this afternoon, is that we have to strive towards accepting and respecting one another. Brinda, may I request you to come in?
It's the same as you and Debojyoti said, ma'am. We should, while we cherish our similarities, we should also respect each other's differences. Now, the four of us, we're of different ages, we have different experiences, beliefs, faiths, values, but we've still come here, sat down together, and had an enlightening discussion. And I think that's the beauty of India, where you could sit any two people down in this population of over 1.3 billion, you could sit at two people down, but if you give them 10 minutes to each other, they could look past their differences and find common ground. There is always common ground in past experiences, history, values, beliefs, culture, everything. And that's where we, the people, that what I spoke on, what I so deeply treasure, it's where we, the people, become one with these experiences and with this respect for each other.
That's also true about 1.3 billion, I mean, which is definitely not a small number that we are looking at. Niharika, why don't you come in?
Yeah, I'm reminded of a lecture that I heard by Fali Nariman, and he had said, and I quote, in a pluralistic society like ours, no matter how great this constitution is or how great it is interpreted, and at the end of the day, it is only as good as it works. So I think it's very important for us to remember this because we are the ones who will make it work. No one else will for us. And back then, it was only created for what 300 million people. Today, like she said, we are over 1.3 billion people. And sometimes the core values that are there in the preamble, we tend to forget them, we tend to misuse them. But it's very important that we don't, because it's the constitutional values and the knowledge that we have which helps us understand how we fit into the world around us. And there's a saying that says, that the day you plant the seed is not the day you eat the fruit. So the planting the seed has been done by the Constituent Assembly what so many years back, and they've laid down the principles of what we can call as an ideal society. And we're still in the process of implementing it. I think we still have a long way to go. That's it.
It's wonderful to hear you say that, that, there's so much hope that I am taking back from this discussion from all which I've had with all three of you. And very truly, you are the citizens of tomorrow. I mean, you are the young adults who are on the verge of acquiring a very, very important right for yourselves. That is the right to vote. And you will be in a position where you will be able to choose, and I'm sure, I have the faith that you will choose very wisely when you make the decision as to who should be the people who should lead us forward and make this republic really what it stands for. And it's true, Niharika, that we definitely have miles to go before we sleep. But I think with the nation in hands like young people like you, who I think have brought forward a very, very important point this afternoon, how much we will enrich ourselves if we are able to respect not only our similarities, but more importantly, our differences, because that is where the success of this Indian polity lies. It's been absolutely wonderful talking to Brinda, Devajyoti, and Niharika. all three from class 11 of the Indus Valley World School. And we look forward to having such thought provoking discussions with compatriots from other schools very soon in the future. And I'm sure what we have discussed this afternoon will leave us with a lot of food for thought on the eve of Republic Day 2021. Thank you so much, all three of you, for joining me this afternoon. And I'm sure there will be a lot that will be generated from the thoughts that you have shared with all of us.